We're now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. First of all, a couple of introductions before we move on to the agenda. A welcome to Jamie Beards, who is now supporting us as the committee clerk. It's no longer Derek Morgan, so our thanks to Derek and a welcome to Jamie. A couple of bits and pieces to do with membership. Stuart Bevan is still with us, but is now an academy rep rather than a primary rep. And we've previously minuted our thanks to Debbie Smith, who is retired and is no longer a member. So those changes will be made to forthcoming minutes. If you went to the end of the agenda, you might see that a date is missing. So just to confirm that the next meeting is the 13th of December, 4:30. A reminder that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live, and that it's being conducted in accordance with the Council's remote meetings protocol, procedure and rules. Please can I ask that microphones are muted, and if anybody would like to make comments, please just raise your hand, and please speak up if I miss those hands going up at all. And just a confirmation that the voting will be by general assent when we get to items that require any voting. Do we have any apologies or substitute members?
I've received apologies from Elizabeth Savage, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we also welcome reps, head teacher reps from primary and secondary, who are joining us for the meeting, not able to vote, but are very welcome to join in with any comments if we're all in agreement with that. Good, welcome. Agenda item number 2 then, please. Are there any declarations of interest? Paul, we've not noted any items that would cause a declaration of interest, so please do speak up if you feel there is an item where you need to declare an interest, but at the outset there are no declarations of interest. Are we all happy with the minutes as they've been produced? I will take that as a yes, so the minutes are approved. If we can go to matters arising, there are a few actions that we need to come to. So there was one on page 4 regarding an update on College Hall, and I believe that's being covered now under item 4. There's another matter arising on page 5 about budget preparations, and there was a request from the forum for Gronier and Councillor Bailey to feed back some budget concerns to government, and that has now been drafted but is just being reviewed. So that action will take place after this meeting. Are we happy with that, Gronier and Roy? Yeah, I can see nods.
Yeah, that's the position. Yes, sorry, still going to get off mute.
Thank you. And then on page 7, there was a request from members regarding some illustration of different scenarios, and that is going to be fully covered in item 6. So unless anybody else has spotted any matters arising, I think they're either all being actioned or are on the agenda. Okay, if we are all happy with that, we will move straight to item number 4, the College Hall update. And am I coming to Zoe for this rather than Paul?
It's Zoe or me, yeah.
Zoe or Chris, sorry.
Yeah, it's if Zoe's in the meeting, I can't see from my Zoom. I'm having to come into my phone, Stuart.
Yeah, I am here, Chris. If you want me to take the lead,
I'm very happy for you two, Zoe, together.
Okay, right. In that case, I'll make a start, Chris, and if there's anything you wish to add, then obviously please do. So obviously, as Stuart's just said, there was a request at the last meeting to provide an update on College Hall. So I'll just run very briefly through the report by way of providing a brief update. Obviously, following the inspection in July 2023, College Hall was judged to be inadequate, which was in line with what we were expecting and what we had predicted. As a result of that, the local authority, in partnership with the school, has prepared a statement of action, a post-inspection action plan that includes a number of actions to directly address the key areas for development identified in the report. So those were focused around things such as ensuring that safeguarding is effective, although actually there'd been a number of improvements to safeguarding prior to the inspection, but there were some outstanding matters that still remained. Ensuring that there was a clear plan for the school's vision and admissions arrangement so that College Hall had a really clear designation. Improving the assessment and teaching of reading, particularly for weaker readers, improving the curriculum so that it meets the needs of College Hall learners and prepares them well for their next steps, developing a more cohesive enrichment programme, and improving attendance, including supporting families to improve the amount of time pupils attend at school. So by way of an update, in terms of the management committee, that management committee continues to demonstrate the capacity to deliver the necessary improvements at College Hall. This was noted in the Ofsted report that the management committee have already started to make effective decisions for the school. I think probably the most important update to note is that unexpectedly the interim head teacher, who was in post for a very short period of time, resigned in July, and over the summer holiday the local authority, working in partnership with the management committee, worked to recruit a new full-time interim head teacher who was in post from the summer holidays. This new interim head teacher has been appointed to work full-time at College Hall at a strategic and operational level. He's highly experienced with a proven track record of securing improvements in similar settings. And I think it's fair to say that the improvements that have been secured to date are already evident. I've just captured in the briefing paper a summary of some of the improvements that have been secured since the inspection in July. So obviously a key, as I've just mentioned, a key development was the appointment of that new interim head teacher. College Hall have also secured an external consultant for 3 days a week to support with the development of teaching, the curriculum and assessment. All of the senior leaders at College Hall now have very clearly defined roles, as do all staff, which has helped to improve accountability and avoid any duplication. There is now a revised admission policy, which has been shared at head teachers briefing. There have been changes to the school timetable to maximise learning. One of the most significant developments is the introduction of a much more robust and comprehensive programme of baseline and diagnostic assessments, particularly in relation to reading, for those pupils at College Hall. All staff have had phonics training, which is targeting a really clearly identified need there. There have been some developments and improvements to the curriculum, making sure that pupils can access a greater offer in terms of practical subjects such as PE, cooking and art. There is a new multi-sensory space at College Hall. Portman Close, which is the satellite provision for the Nurture Group, has also opened over the recent weeks. Leaders have implemented a new behaviour policy. There's been a reduction in suspensions. There have been improvements to attendance. The processes and systems for monitoring and recording attendance have been significantly improved. There have been significant improvements to the physical environment at College Hall, including new equipment, improvements to the physical space, the development of a new library at College Hall, and some really fantastic learning displays around the school. In terms of the kind of wider strategic changes for College Hall, obviously as a school causing concern, College Hall is subject to an academy order as set out in the DfE statutory guidance. Obviously, the selection of an appropriate sponsor is delegated to the regional director by the Secretary of State. However, the regional director's officials have been working very closely with the local authority and the management committee in terms of the trust being considered. And the good relationships between the council and the regional director's office have meant that we've been able to have a full and meaningful consultation, and that's ongoing. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add about that, Chris.
No, that's very comprehensive. Hello.
Yeah.
Ah.
Oh,
Sorry, I can't see. I can't see anybody else in
I've
here.
just realised. Apologies, everybody. I've just realised that my little slider on my camera was across. I didn't realise I was a black screen. Apologies.
It's all right. So, what did you say, Zoe? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I was just saying. I don't know if there's anything, Chris, that you would
No.
like to add, or whether anybody on the forum's got any questions.
Yeah, I'd rather take questions, Zoe. It's very comprehensive.
Okay, we've got a hand up from Paul Tatum.
Sorry, I'm also struggling to unmute. Just wanted to ask a question about staff welfare and well-being. I mean, it sounds like you've done amazing work there, so well, congratulations. But has been any obviously when schools can be chaotic or kind of difficult workplaces, I know that staff well-being can slip off quite quickly. So just wondering if any work had been done by the new interim head or anyone else with regards to kind of making sure the staff are being looked after and looking after themselves as well.
So do you want to start, or do you want me to start on that?
Well, all I was going to say about that is I think that the impact of having the security of having that leader there in post has had a significantly positive impact on staff well-being. Some of the clarity and the stability of knowing that person is in post, and certainly since he's been in post, staff well-being has been a really strong focus. But I don't know if there's anything particular, Chris, you want to add.
Yeah, there is. Since I went there for 2 hours last week, and Zoe will know because I wrote to the head teacher, interim head teacher, and copied Zoe in. It was transformational what has happened in that place. The main progress has been with pupil attitude and behaviour, because he's come in with higher expectations of what happens in that place. And I spent 25 minutes talking to the pupils there, and they were just full of praise of the improvements in the curriculum. We were cooked food by the boys in the kitchen, and they brought it round to us because we were actually going around the Prue. Now, that doesn't directly address your question, but it addresses it sort of elliptically through it's a much better working environment for everybody now. It was not properly in control late in the summer term, and now it is, and I'm confident. And also he's in a building that's quite dilapidated. He has transformed that by the displays, by the thoughtful wall mountings on there. And I talked to some of the staff when I was there, and they look happier and relaxed and more confident about delivering a curriculum to those pupils. So I think the answer to that, through the behaviour and through the improvements in the curriculum and the environment, I think he's had a terrifically positive effect on staff well-being.
Okay, I think we've got. Thank you, Chris.
That's all right.
I think just on that point, it's probably beyond the remit of the forum, but Zoe, I'm sure the management committee as well will have a responsibility to make sure that staff welfare is high on the agenda.
Absolutely.
And I can see, I think Councillor Bailey would like to make a comment.
Yes, I just to echo everything Chris has said. I visited College Hall a couple of weeks ago, and I was so impressed with everything I saw. The head teacher was quite striking. The charisma, the learning walls were very impressive. I just thought it was. I mean, I came back and thought long and hard about what an impact it had made on me, and I'm sure it's the same for the kids going there. So I just wanted to pass that back. I was very impressed by it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments? I think we've had some concerns around College Hall and particularly the quality of the provision, and also the accessibility of College Hall to students from our schools. So anything that suggests it's moving in the right direction is good news, and hopefully it's on its way to being fully open and accepting students. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, in that case, this was an item for information, so there are no recommendations that we have to vote on, so we can move on to the next item. Thank you very much, Chris and Zoe. Item number 5 is the school budget monitoring. Paul, I think we're coming to you for that one.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I'll keep this fairly brief, because it is, as you said, it's about bringing an update on where we're performing on the school's budget for the current financial year. It is an annual report, so hopefully the layout and sort of content we put on there is familiar to everyone, so it is quite easy to flick through this, although there are obviously some sort of technical areas that is covered as well. So in terms of just running through the content of the report, so there's a section towards the start which just explains the level that the budget was set, and then sets out the changes that have occurred since that particular start of the financial year. So we have had some updates in terms of how much DSG funding we're going to get for things like the high needs block and early years. Some of those have changed, like they always do when there's a refresh of data. There's also been some new grants allocated during the course of the year that we're expecting, particularly around the early years supplementary grant and the teachers additional pay grant. So they've been added into the budget as well, just to reflect that extra money that's coming into schools as well. So just quickly going into the overall headline, I think people will be aware that when we set the budget, we were forecasting an overspend, and we have been for a number of years now on the high needs block, and it was forecast at 7.166 million. But going through our work through in the course of the year, that position has deteriorated somewhat, and we are now expecting an overspending of £8.654 million. And in terms of that, there are 2 key areas that contribute to the significant deterioration of the financial performance. So the actual rate of increase in education healthcare plans has been greater than we were anticipating when the budget was set. So they're about 20% higher than we were expecting the increase to be, and that accounts for about £500,000 of additional spend in year. And the other thing is that the price increases have been significantly above what we built into the budget, and that was particularly in independent non-maintained special schools, where we are experiencing inflation of around 10%. Some of that, well, cost increases, average cost increases, so some of that will actually be cost of care as well, but factoring in the inflationary increase as well, that's nearly double what we were forecasting in the original budget. So that's around £600,000 of the overall increase. And we've also experienced some cost pressures at College Hall. We've had an update on the performance of the service just now, but the actual budget performance is indicating around a £200,000 overspend against the original budget there as well. So there are the main areas that have impacted on the deterioration of the financial performance during the year. And obviously this is then adding to our cumulative deficit. So come the end of this financial year, we are expecting a deficit on the high needs block budget of nearly £30 million, which exceeds the level of income we get each year. So obviously this is building into the difficulties we're experiencing on the high needs block, and something that obviously has implications again for the safety valve item that we'll be talking about later. So there are a number of different points and notes to the figures. There's a set of tables towards the end in the annexes, and there's also some notes to explain some of the changes, a line of budget detail that we report there. So I'm not planning to go through any of those specifically now, but obviously any questions that arise, we'll do our best to answer those. And there's also, just to finalise by saying that there's an update on the capital programme as well, which is, as we know, has been diminishing recently as we've not been undertaking the same level of capital investment, particularly around additional school places, because we're not in need of those anymore. But there's a small underspending of just over £100,000 being forecast on the capital programme as well. So this is just bringing you an up-to-date snapshot of where we are on budget monitoring as at the end of September this year. So I think that's all I'd really want to say on this particular report. So I'll open up for any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions on the update? Grant.
Thanks, Stuart. So I've read the paper, Paul, and I've heard what you said. I'm right. So high needs block is obviously the biggest driver for the overspend. I think it's worth saying, and I hope you're going to correct me, is that actually what you're saying is that overspend is actually largely out of our control, in that we've got rampant inflation, we've got other issues that actually this is not Bracknell Forest Council and Bracknell Forest Schools being prolific with public money. This is actually something that we are along for the ride to a certain extent, and actually despite some efforts by yourself and school leaders in the borough and councillors, actually we're not actually able to stop this juggernaut very easily, because all the other areas I looked at suggest that there's a little bit of an overspend, a little bit of an underspend. Actually looks like very sensible financial management, but HNB is not. Because I feel like sometimes we beat ourselves up and we feel a bit like we're all on the naughty step because we're spending all this money, but actually actual children are benefiting from the high needs block. Some of them are in school because of the high needs block. Some of them, they're having their needs met because of the high needs block. And actually it's national government's failure to fund SEN and sort it out properly, rather than Bracknell Forest Council and officers on this meeting and school leaders in this meeting, why we are in this mess. And I would just like us to say that, and I'd like to state that publicly, that I just feel a little bit we are being told off, that we must do the safety valve program, we must do this, we must do that, as if we are in the wrong. And we are not in the wrong. We are supporting young people with complex needs in school, and we are not just splashing the cash around.
Okay, yeah, I think the main point to say on that is in the short term there's not a lot we can do about that, but I think we do recognise that there is some work we can do over the medium term in terms of the actual capacity we've got to keep more children in Bracknell Forest schools. We can work with providers on prices and charges that are coming through and try and get that more efficient working. So there is some stuff we can do, but most of that is over the medium term, and that's what part of our work is that we've been doing recently with head teachers and schools, and which we hope to take forward, of which part of that may well be through the safety valve, but to some extent yes, we can affect that over the medium term, but not so much in the short term. I don't know if there's anyone else wants to make a comment on that as well.
Grania, you've raised your hand. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So unfortunately, as politically neutral officers, Grant, we're unable to give a view on the statement that you made. But I'll invite Councillor Bailey to come in on one moment. In terms of the expenditure against the high needs block, again, it does relate to us having to spend quite a lot of money with children who we cannot educate in the borough due to the level of their complex needs, which we know we're all collectively working on a solution for. So I'll stop there and hand over to Councillor Bailey to give a political view.
Yes, thank you, Grania. Yes, I very definitely can give a political view, and I listened intensely to what Grant was saying, and I couldn't disagree with anything he said. We're left in this position through no fault of our own. I've seen it firsthand, the sterling work that the officers are doing to do all they can to pull back, but ultimately this will impact on our children. I mean, it can do nothing but that. Mary, as council leader, has written already to James Sunderland a very explicit letter pointing out the problems that we've had with the Department for Education, particularly over the analysis or the funding formula that was incorrectly sent. They got it wrong. They've been castigated for that. But the end result still, though, is that we're going to be left with a budget that's not going to be sufficient for what we know needs to happen. And that's desperate. I'm also going to start lobbying. I mean, I've this afternoon been in touch with the Shadow Education Secretary's office to make them fully aware of all of this, to make sure that more lobbying can be done in Parliament, because ultimately it's going to require increased government funding on this. Bracknell Forest is limited to what it can do. And as I say, those of us involved at close hand can see the efforts that Stuart and Grania and the others are putting in to do what they can. And it's brilliant what they're doing, but it's trying to turn the tide back. Small gestures, we can make inroads, there's no question, but longer term, it requires much more government funding. The end result is it's for our children. It's for our children. I think I'm getting interrupted, so I better, you get the gist. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Yeah, we have got a couple of phones which are not muted. Chris's iPhone and an Abigail. If you're able to hear us, your phones are not. Your connection isn't muted. Thank you. I've got a couple of comments to add, but before I do, anybody else want to make any observations? In that case, Grant, thank you for your comments and the responses, and certainly I fully support those. My concern is that as that deficit grows, which appears to be the forum's ability to do anything about, we're simply asked to note at this update, the consequences do fall back on students and the children in our schools. And so I think whilst we're being asked to note it, I do think we have to note it with concern, because it comes with consequence. And I think it comes back to, as we've said in previous occasions, about our request, and we know that you're right to raise those concerns with government, and we should all be doing all we can to lobby for the appropriate funding. And we are in danger of drifting on to the next item, which is looking at next year's funding. So if I can draw, unless there's any other comments, can I draw you back to page 13, where there are some recommendations. And as I've just said, this is simply for us to note, so there is no vote, but we note what Paul has told us about the forecast overspend. We note the emerging issues, and that overspend is set to increase this year, and of course then cumulatively. And we note that overspend, the liability for that overspend, will transfer back to local authorities in April 26. And there was a little bit at the end of that report about the education capital programme. And so that is all duly noted. Thank you very much for that report. So we move on to more joy in item number 6, which is an update on budgets for next year and the financial consultation. And we're coming back to Paul.
Thank you again, Chair. Yeah, so again, this is another annual report. This time it's slightly different because obviously there is a bit of an update on the 24-25 budget that's already been touched on, and a few comments so far. And it also provides the update on responses to the financial consultation, where we seek views on some of the areas that we need to consider as part of the budget setting process for next year, but taking account of the work we're doing to potentially move into the safety valve, we don't think it's appropriate to make any decisions on the budget for 24-25 yet until all that's clarified. But it's still good to have this information to hand and some feedback to help and use that when the time becomes appropriate to do that. This is just a to note paper as well, so there's not a recommendation, it's just to give you an update. So I think I'd just like to focus in terms of the update from the DfE on the 24-25 financial settlement. That there's a table on page 26, paragraph 2.7, where I've just tried to summarise the initial announcements to those that have been updated and corrected, and obviously they've generally been a deterioration of the amount of funding that will be for schools next year. I would just like to quickly point out a typo, I'll call it a typo, on the row that says England average increase in per pupil funding, so the second row of figures. The change does actually say minus 0.6 is minus 0.8, so apologies for that error there. But you can see, and this follows on some of the communication we sent out to schools, that our grant income in the dedicated schools grants going down £900,000. The average increase in per pupil funding in Bracknell's going down 0.9%, and basically the DfE are reducing funding levels in the national funding formula by around 1%. and that's as a consequence of underestimating the number of pupils that are in the system, and therefore setting a budget on a lower number than they actually have to. So obviously they come back and reduce the amount of per pupil funding that they can now afford. So that's obviously rippled across all local authorities. So that's the summary of the changes. I don't think there's anything else to add to that. Just then moving on to the next bit of information in that report, which follows on from paragraph 2.8, where the last meeting of the forum asked to see if we could do some modelling on what would our DSG income in the high needs block potentially be if it was factored around a 9% increase, which is every year, which is what we've been having for a number of years. That doesn't show a huge difference from what we've actually got, but one illustration that I thought might be useful to present, which is set out in that table in paragraph 211, is if you look at our 2018-19 position where we just about balanced the budget, if you look at that stage how much funding we were getting per child with an education healthcare plan, and then you just multiplied that per plan funding each year going forward, plus an allocation for inflation, we would have received in our DSG grant that red line of income. So we would have been getting the £29.85 million in 22-23, when in fact we got just over £20 million, and we overspent around £27 million. So you can look at this a number of ways, but one way of looking at it is that the per pupil funding for children with an education healthcare plan has not kept pace with the actual increase of those plans that are coming into the system. And to speak, Bracknell Forest Council is not an outlier in terms of the proportion of children that have an education healthcare plan. We are consistent with the average across England, so it's not like we've got something particular or peculiar in our area. But if the funding had come through that methodology, we would have been in a lot better position, and I imagine most other local authorities would do as well. So that's just an indication of, if we roll back the equivalent sort of funding we were getting in 18, 19 and still got that now, we would be balancing our budget. And part of that, the reason we would be balancing budget is because we have taken some steps to actually reduce some of our expenditure to open up more places in borough as well. So that's why it's below what we would have expected. Our spend is below what we would have expected if that income had continued on that particular track. So hopefully that gives a different insight to where we are on the budget. But it's, as I say, it's responding to a comment that was made at the last schools forum. And then the other part of this paper is just giving you outcomes from the financial consultations with school. So a lot of you will be familiar that we, as part of the budget setting process, we do tend to ask the same questions year on year because they are the key parts of the budget and the areas that the schools forum does have a decision-making role rather than consultation. So that's in this paper, and we also asked a couple of questions on looking at the notional SEN funding as well, so that's picked up as well. So I think the easiest thing to do is just quickly run through those tables on page 28. So you can see the first table that we have had a good response rate again, and sorry, there's another typo there where it says 521%, and the first left-hand column, that should be 51%. So made a correction there, but didn't take the other figure out, so apologies for that. But so we've got quite a good we've still got a good response rate. Over half schools are responding, so we are quite confident that we've got a good understanding of what schools' views are on those questions with the number that are responding. And so then following down the table through the page to the bottom of 28 and the top of 29, you can see that of the questions we're asking, the normal ones are questions 1 to 4 about what do we do about minimum funding guarantee, do we still do dedelegation, and are maintained schools happy to continue to make, well, I won't say happy, are maintained schools prepared to continue to make a £20 per pupil contribution to statutory duties. And you can see from those that all of those are strongly supported from the responses that we received. And then the last two questions related to notional SEN. So these are more discretionary, and this reflects the fact that we haven't looked at the review of how we do notional SEN for many years, and it is a statutory requirement now to publish this information with the budget that schools get each year. So we thought it was timely to review that, and what we've looked at is two parts of that. How do we determine what schools we would expect schools to spend on supporting children with special educational needs? So we've looked at we would think it would be closely linked with the number of children on SEN support and the number of children with an education healthcare plan, and that proposal to look at determine the total amount was agreed by the majority of respondents. And then we said, well, okay, how can we then illustrate that calculation at an individual school level? The DfE won't allow us to use the number of children on SEND support, or the number of education healthcare plans on making that illustrative calculation. We have to use the factors in the funding formula. Neither of those two are factors in the funding formula, so we have to do it a slightly different way. And what we've suggested is that we do that illustration by the factors in the funding formula that are basically proxies for additional educational needs, so the deprivation measures and the low prior attainment, plus a very small amount of per pupil funding. So it is very, very similar to what we're doing now, but we've gone through a process, obviously, of asking schools for views, and the vast majority of the respondents are saying, yes, we want to continue on that particular methodology. So, as I say, no decisions just yet, but we've got some information to work on when the time is right to consider those areas. And then the final part of the report there just sets out some of the specific comments that have been received to this consultation and some responses to those. So again, those sort of things will be looked at in a bit more detail as we go through the process, and we will be making some changes to the way we do this consultation in future years to reflect on those comments. And if you want to see the specific comments, they are actually in the annexes of the report. So I think that's all I'd want to pick up on this particular paper. So I don't know if there's any questions. Again, this is an information one, but obviously welcome any comments, questions as well on this paper.
I'll start with a couple, and then I'll come to you, Grant. I think it almost feels futile commenting, because this body's got no power to do anything about it other than record our observations, and I think all of the colleagues in the room will have huge concern over paragraph 2.4, where the funding settlement looks like it's gone from 2.7 to 1.9 to 1.7, and that's before any implications of the safety valve. And the truth of that is, it's cuts. There is no way that funding settlement is going to keep up with inflationary costs or an appropriate pay award for staff. The only way that schools are going to manage this is by cuts. And so if all we can do is note, then I think we have to note our extreme concerns, dismay about the impact that this level of funding will have on children in the borough. And that's no criticism of officers at all. I know this is you passporting information to us, but it is extremely concerning. Grant.
So Stuart, can I just say, although this is an information paper, that doesn't prevent you as a forum from making comments on it. Yeah. You don't just have to know if you want to make a comment. We can actually build that into the minutes as well.
Okay, and I hope then that we can build in and reflect this in the minutes that are being taken, and maybe we'll come back to a statement when we've heard some other views. Sorry, Grant.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I'm actually just to echo that. I'd note that the Bank of England are saying that inflation won't be down to 2% until the latter end of 2025. So 1.7 is going to be low inflation anyway. And then, as you mentioned, safety valve and the changes to funding to top up is schools are going to get a real terms cut. There is no two ways about it. But actually, my point was, and actually is about commenting, is that in the paper, 4.1. Strategic risk management issues. Surely this budget, if it was delivered in the way that the government is suggesting, is a significant risk to the council and its schools and its children. And I noticed I think it's in the previous paper, I think it's a similar section, 7 point something, there is a long list of risks noted with the overspend. And many of those risks are exactly the same, including recruitment and retention of staff, safeguarding children, delivering the services. And actually, I would like to see in the paper the risks of a below inflation funding cut to Bracknell Forest children noted. And I think, the fact that there's no risks associated with this is, I think, a bit of a shame that that's not noted as being a risk. There is a risk to a budget being delivered in Bracknell Forest to Bracknell Forest children. And I think, we should note it as a forum that it's simply not good enough.
Absolutely. Thank you, Grant. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Stuart. I just want to firstly echo what you and Grant have said there. I agree entirely with what's been said. I understand there was some lobbying for James Sunderland. I was just wondering from Councillor Bailey. I was wondering if there'd been any response from him or his office yet in terms of whether or not he was willing to lobby on behalf of his constituents and the schools in his constituency.
No response at all yet, Paul. None whatsoever.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay, thank you.
I wonder if Ruth or Stuart, there was some comments that we've had in other meetings about particular risks to smaller schools, whether we wanted to raise that particularly in this meeting, or if that's not appropriate.
Sorry, Stuart, that took a while.
Hello,
yeah,
Ruth.
we had when we spoke to colleagues about sort of budgets and everything, it was just mentioned about how it is much harder it feels much harder for smaller schools. We don't benefit, for example, we don't receive as much pupil premium as larger schools, and we just felt that things like that need to be taken into consideration when we're talking about budgets, about the impact that it does have on the smaller schools that we still have in Bracknell Forest, that are successful schools and that are very popular with parents. So we feel they need to be protected.
Thank you. Are there any more comments before we move to agreeing what note we're making here?
Yeah, just to back up what Ruth said, because we're in a similar position with the one form entry school. And I know that the children with real severe needs, with EHCPs, are coming through the schools hard and fast. But for one form entry, when you've got 5 children who in reception you've got, need an EHCP, it can put an awful lot of stress on a school. And as you said, if the budget gets light, but first time ever we're looking at a deficit budget in the near future. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Grant.
Yeah, sorry to come back. I just wanted to add that often when we talk about budgets, we get down the rabbit hole of talking about pounds and pence. And I think in our note, I think we need to remember that actually the outcome of this money is people, and that it's young people. It's, it's our children in nurseries, it's our children in primary schools, students in secondary schools. And actually, if schools don't have enough money, they don't get the education they deserve. They lose life opportunities. Children with complex needs don't get the support they need. There are real life implications to not having the appropriate funding. And not only that, it's also our teachers and our support staff. I don't know if you saw Education Support's 7th Wellbeing Survey. 78% of teachers report being stressed. 89% of school leaders, rising to 95% of head teachers, report being stressed. Balancing budgets, managing behaviour and complex needs in schools are all driving this, and we are driving our professionals and our children into the ground. And I think we need to note the outcome of budget settlements like this. It's not just about pounds and pence; it is about people. And I think we can't forget that, and that needs to be noted.
Thank you. Caroline.
Thank you, Stuart. I think my point is around other stakeholders, so parents, for example. So how much awareness is there amongst parents of the financial situation of the local authority and its ability to support schools, and particularly those children with SEN? I know we have SENDIAS and we have parents forums, but actually this translates into real disadvantage, exactly as Grant is saying, for some of our most vulnerable children. But not only that, the impact on our children who aren't disadvantaged due to the lack of additional adult support in schools, because we are dealing with lower budgets, having to make cuts, only being able to fund supporting adults where there's an EHCP, and those don't even cover it. So I think parental education needs to take place as part of this.
Thank you very much, and I can see comments of agreement going into the chat as well. Is there anybody else who would like to add to the discussion or the concerns? Okay, in that case, I think we have to note that the 24-25 budgets and the consultation has been shared with us, but I think we also have to note that perhaps we are objecting in the strongest terms to what is a real terms cut, and that these cuts pose significant risks to the children in our borough. So we note it, but we note it with our strong objections and our fears for the risks of the children in our borough. Are we all happy with that note? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we move on from that to item number 7, which is the safety valve update, and over to Gronya, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And Dwayne, I'll invite Dwayne to come in to give an update on the direct engagement with our educational leaders. And you will all recall, and it's very clear in the minutes of the last meeting, that we introduced and gave an update on the approach by the DfE to the local authority for engagement in the safety valve, and the note about the meeting that we had in early October. Very clearly, there was no movement on those dates. Very, very tight time frame within which to get some meaningful engagement with yourselves as head teachers and school leaders into the whole process. We did give that commitment. We did share that, but we have done as much as we can to ensure that our head teachers are appropriately engaged, even though it's been incredibly difficult. So we've approached it this time, approached it in the last period with openness and transparency. We've listened to the real pressures and concerns that you have as head teachers, and I do appreciate the fact that you've been able to join the workshops and give your views and your concerns about the piece of work that we need to do. We have adopted an approach of openness and transparency, and very clear about how we can limit the impact on schools of the work that we need to do in order to be able to implement or submit a credible plan to the Department of Education on the 15th of December. So I just want to start by just connecting us to the previous conversation and the work that's taken place, because there's a significant amount of work by yourselves as school leaders in supporting us to get as far as we have in the development of the plans thus far. So the information in the report outlines some priority areas that we've been looking at, and there's a significant amount of work that you've contributed to looking at those key areas of activity that would actually formulate into a credible plan for submission on the 15th. The dates are included in the report. The final submission and agreement obviously is the 12th of January, but we need to get a credible plan by the 15th of December. In the context of the report itself, we are not coming forward at this stage for a top slice, which was part of quite a debate at the last meeting about the potential impact, especially as we continue to have the conversations about the significant pressure that our school leaders are under in terms of ensuring that budgets are sufficient to deliver appropriate educational outcomes for all of our pupils in Bracknell Forest. So that is appreciated. In the context then of the detail of the workshops, and then I'll come back with summary and next steps. Dwayne, do you want to go into a little bit more detail of the work that our head teacher colleagues have contributed to in terms of the discussions about areas of funding and where we actually potentially commit and don't commit our money going forward?
Yeah, sorry, just before we do that, there's a query from Sue.
Thank you, Stuart. Gronya, could I please just raise, is the Voice of Early Years and our providers going to be heard on this? Will we be consulted with at all?
I mean, I'm happy to come in on that. And at the moment, and I've sort of spoke to Cherry or emailed
Have we all lost Wayne?
Yeah,
Oh.
I did.
Can you hear
Okay,
me?
I think you're back. You're back. Let's try again. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Early years will be involved as we structure more around what we know, what we're going to deliver. In terms of the high needs block, schools were invited, all schools were invited to the workshops. So that included schools with nurseries. In terms of the PVI sector, which is predominantly the early years sector, they draw very, very little funding from the high needs block. So most of the workshops have been done with our school leaders at the moment, of which if you are a school, you were invited to those workshops. So we have our 2 workshops and moving forward as we sort of design and work with our school leaders and our parents and carers. And as we design the sort of projects we're going to deliver to sort of bring the budget into a balanced position, then engagement and more engagement with sectors as required will be undertaken. So what we did do for colleagues that are unaware, we had 2 workshops last month, and that really, as Gráinne said, was to be open and transparent about our spend against the high needs block. And head teachers and colleagues were asked to prioritise and say what they felt required improvement or a different perhaps model of delivery. Those where we felt we needed to look more into and to make sure they were offering best outcomes for our children and best value for money, and those really where we really shouldn't touch. So we have presented them findings back to colleagues, and it was consistent, I would say, across the piece from head teachers of where really the high priority areas were identified. I've also conducted the same exercise with our Parent Carer Forum, who represent all families in Bracknell Forest. And again, when that information comes back, we will overlay that as well in terms of the findings from our school leaders. When I look at some of the provisions we have, they're predominantly secondary provisions. So I have asked for all head teachers to have another workshop next week. And I appreciate fully this, the shortness of time in doing this. But again, the time frame we've got to work on is very, very narrow. And again, we will look at potential options or ideas from school leaders in what we can do in terms of some of the services we have identified as being area of change or need to change or not perhaps best value for money. So we will continue working alongside our school leaders as and when we need to involve the early years sector. And as I said, when I look at the budgets, the early years sector has its own pot of money. It's not drawing on the high needs block as any other sector is. But of course, we will work with our sector as we move forward. So as a rule of thumb, what I'm asking school leaders and colleagues today in the Schools Forum, as we work through the safety valve, I would really appreciate your engagement as well and involvement in how best we can bring our in-year budget into a balanced position over the next few years. And I acknowledge, and I've been around lots of schools, and I acknowledge the need in school. So in terms of the areas, the sort of 4 areas we're looking at is, that early intervention model, and these are the themes that have come out. It is about the right provision at the right time. So do we have the right provision in Bracknell Forest for our children and young people? And is that provision we've got being effective and giving us the outcomes that we want from our children? And is it value for money? And again, in terms of the services that sit within the high needs block and that are being funded for the high needs block, again, for me, are they giving us the outcomes that we want? Are they providing you as school leaders with the support you require? And again, are they value for money in terms of, what we are spending on them services? The other thing we are looking at, and I discussed with heads, is the banding tool. And we have agreed to go ahead with the banding tool that was trialled. I've been open and transparent. The sort of values that were sitting behind that banding 2 was putting too much pressure on the high needs block. And if we had gone away with them value, we probably would have put circa 20 million in year overspend on the high needs block on top of what we already got. So we are going to work with that. I have, and I'm quite passionate about sort of local provision for children to attend their local schools in their local community. So I have seconded 1 day a week a head teacher to work alongside in leading how we improve and get our resource provisions to be best practice so that we can share that expertise across the local area. Finally, I mean, as we come into the themes that are emerging, it is around, you know, the pathways for children moving through the educational system. And that does include from early years through to post-16 and making sure they are as robust as they can be. So, and I know Gráinne spoke about there's nothing off the table. Certainly want to work with colleagues as we move through this process over the next few years. So I would welcome any names from today if you want to join any work streams as we start working on some of the stuff. And I'm open to questions, Stuart. I'm back to Gráinne.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Gráinne, did you have anything to add to that?
No, it takes Sue's comment first and then I'll sum up.
Sorry, thank you for that, Dwayne. Can I just push that further as to when we'll be consulted with? And obviously the EY block responses.
So in terms of the early years block, I mean, Cherry would be coming up with you in terms of the early years block because that block is just for the early years sector. And when we look at the early years block, you're not overspent on the early years block, and 95% of that just gets sent straight out to the sector, and we retain some money in terms of administrative functions for that sector. What we are going to look at, and again, the council do contribute out of the council's sort of central funds and money. So as I work with the head teachers and as we analyse the data now and we start saying, okay, this is what we're going to look at, this is what we're going to do, and we have not formalised anything at all because we are in engagement, then I will, if there's anything that is affecting the early years sector, then absolutely I will engage with the early years sector, and that's my promise to you. And as I said, you know, it's not just your sector, but it's also, we have sort of childminders as well that we need to say, okay, what services. But what I will say to you, you're a completely different block of funding within the DSG, and you know, 95% that comes out. We have 2 children with plans at the moment in my data saying that in the early years sector, but absolutely I'm committed to working with you, and I will as soon as I have some sort of idea, formalised idea what we're going to do, and that's my commitment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we, Gráinne, do you want to?
Yeah, just to summarise, I'm mindful that in the discussion last time and in our discussion on Monday and in the discussion today, the well-being of our school leaders is highlighted as a significant issue, and we can just continue to give that commitment that we'll continue to work in partnership with you as far as possible, being as creative as we can with the money we have available, so that if we do have to implement a top slice, we've been very creative with how we do that. So at the moment in the report, it's just indicating that a top slice is likely to be needed and the proposed dates within which that consultation will take place. But you will know well ahead of that whether or not that intention becomes real. And you'll be working with us jointly in terms of what that looks like. So, and I'll stop there and take any final questions.
I think it's probably important to note that this item is for us to look at the work that has been undertaken and not to share our views on any proposals, because those proposals are not ready and will be forthcoming. And that discussion will take place in the forum meeting on the 13th of December. So we look forward to those proposals. And I think, Gráinne, just in response to your comment about top slicing, I think you can hear the fear and worry from schools about the settlement without the top slice not being sufficient, and any further top slicing on that will of course add to the difficulties that schools are facing. So we'll come to the full proposals at the next meeting to have a discussion about that. But has anybody got any comments on the work that has been undertaken so far? In that case, I think I would like to thank the officers for the work that has been undertaken, and thank and acknowledge Dwayne's comments about the considerable amount of time that has been put into those consultations by head teachers to try and make sure that voices have been heard. And I'm aware that there are still a considerable number of meetings and information gathering and sharing. So thank you very much to everybody for the work that has gone into it so far. Any other comments? In that case, this meeting is concluding. Just a reminder that the next meeting is on the 13th of December at 4:30. I've not been made aware of any items of other business, but are there any other business? In that case, we'll close the meeting. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.